The top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, Jamie Raskin, did not ease into this hearing. He walked in swinging. Attorney General Pam Bondi was testifying before the House Judiciary Committee, and from the jump, it was clear Democrats weren't there for small talk. Their focus? Donald Trump, the DOJ, and what they argue is a massive cover-up tied to Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking network. Meanwhile, MAGA Republicans, let's just say Epstein's name seemed to have mysteriously vanished from their vocabulary. Democrats pointed out that Trump and MAGA Mike appear to have made it very clear, don't go there. But Raskin? He absolutely went there. And Bondi? She barely even looked at him while he dismantled her point by point. It was that kind of hearing. Before things even started, Bondi walked into a not-so-warm welcome. Protesters shouted, cameras were rolling, and the tension was thick.
Bondi, you are a disgrace to the American people. You protect pedophiles who systematically rape.
Not exactly a good morning, Madam Attorney General kind of vibe. Then Raskin began. He welcomed her politely and then immediately reminded her what the job actually is.
Welcome, Attorney General Bondi. You've got the best lawyer's job in America because your mission is justice and your clients are the American people. But to promote justice for the people, you've got to listen to the victims, like the women seated behind you today. Those are just some of the hundreds of survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's global sex trafficking ring who are demanding that the truth be told and are demanding accountability for the abusers who trafficked and raped them. You still haven't met with these survivors. So with their permission, let me introduce to you the survivors and late survivors' family members who are present today. There's Teresa Helm, there's Jess Michaels, Laura Bloom McGee, Danny Bensky, Liz Stein, Marina Lacerda, Sky and Amanda Roberts, who are the family of the late Virginia Giuffre, Charlene Richard, and Lisa Phillips. Now, you're not showing a lot of interest in the victims, Madam Attorney General, whether it's Epstein's human trafficking ring or the homicidal governmental violence against citizens in Minneapolis. As Attorney General, you're siding with the perpetrators and you're ignoring the victims. That will be your legacy unless you act quickly to change course.
The Attorney General's client isn't Donald Trump, it's the American people. And if you're going to represent the people, he said, you have to listen to the victims. He gestured to the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking ring seated behind her, women who say they still haven't even been granted a meeting with the DOJ under Bondi's leadership. He named them, one by one. Family members of victims, including those connected to Virginia Giuffre, were there. The message was clear. These aren't headlines, they're human beings.
That will be your legacy unless you act quickly to change course. You're running a massive Epstein cover-up right out of the Department of Justice. You've been ordered by subpoena and by Congress to turn over 6 million documents, photographs, and videos in the Epstein files, but you've turned over only 3 million. You say you're not turning over the other 3 million because they're somehow duplicative, but we know that there are actual memos of victim statements in there. And you also took down the Department of Justice's prosecution memo from 2019. So it's clearly not all duplicative, but even if it were, why not release it? Just release all the duplicative stuff. In the half you did produce, you redacted the names of abusers, enablers, accomplices, and co-conspirators, apparently to spare them embarrassment and disgrace, which is the exact opposite of what the law ordered you to do. Even worse, you shockingly failed to redact many of the victims' names, which is what you were ordered to do by Congress. Some of the victims had come forward publicly, but many had not. Many had kept their torment private, even from family and friends, but you published their names, their identities, their images on thousands of pages for the world to see. So you ignored the law, and even with over 100,000 employees at your disposal, you acted with some mixture of staggering incompetence, cold indifference, and jaded cruelty towards more than 1,000 victims raped, abused, and trafficked. This performance screams cover-up.
Bondi didn't appear interested. Raskin warned her that siding with perpetrators and ignoring victims could define her legacy unless she changes course quickly.
But abandoning victims and coddling perpetrators is what you do best. When the FBI opened a criminal investigation into the brutal killing in Minneapolis of Renee Good, a poet and 37-year-old mother of 3, by Trump's masked paramilitary ICE agents, you shut it down. You claim you're investigating the cold-blooded murder of Alex Preddy, an ICU nurse at the VA. But how can we trust the administration when the president and Kristi Noem called Preddy a domestic terrorist and Stephen Miller called him a would-be assassin? Not only do you refuse to share evidence with the state and local investigators and prosecutors in Minnesota, you have blocked their access to the crime scene and the evidence. How are you seeking justice for Marimar Martinez, the Montessori school teacher in Chicago who was shot 5 times by a Border Patrol agent who bragged about it on text? Or the family of Keith Porter, a father of 2 shot and killed by an off-duty ICE agent in LA? Or the family of Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, shot and killed in Illinois minutes after he dropped his kids off at school? There's no sign of any movement at the Department of Justice. You even launched a criminal investigation into Renee Good's grieving widow. How sick is that? But it's even
Then came the bombshell accusation, a massive Epstein cover-up operating straight out of the Department of Justice. Congress subpoenaed 6 million documents tied to Epstein. According to Raskin, only 3 million were handed over. Bondi claimed the rest were duplicative. Raskin's response? Even if they were duplicative, release them anyway, especially when victim statements are reportedly included. Worse, he argued, the DOJ redacted the names of alleged abusers and enablers but failed to properly redact victims' names in multiple instances. If true, that's not just a paperwork error, that's devastating.
It's even worse. You've turned the People's Department of Justice into Trump's instrument of revenge. Trump orders up prosecutions like pizza, and you deliver every time. He tells you to go after James Comey, Letitia James, Lisa Cook, and Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve Board, and members of Congress like Adam Schiff, Mark Kelly, Alyssa Slotkin, Chrissy Houlihan, Jason Crow, Chris Deluzio, and Maggie Goodlander, to name a few, and you snap to it. You replace real prosecutors with counterfeit stooges who robotically do the president's bidding. Nothing in American history comes close to this complete corruption of the justice function and contamination of federal law enforcement.
He described it as a mix of incompetence, indifference, and cruelty toward more than 1,000 victims. And he wasn't done. Raskin broadened the scope, accusing the DOJ under Trump and Bondi of targeting political opponents while abandoning victims in other high-profile cases. He claimed Trump orders prosecutions like pizza and Bondi delivers. He rattled off names of officials and public figures allegedly targeted after Trump publicly criticized them. According to Raskin, career prosecutors have resigned rather than carry out what they saw as politically motivated directives. Some of those resignations came with blistering letters.
The good news is many serious lawyers at DOJ, including some of your own original appointees, have refused your lawless orders. Danielle Sassoon, your original pick for acting U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, resigned rather than follow your corrupt order to quash an indictment against Mayor Eric Adams as a political favor from Donald Trump. A Federalist Society member who clerked for Justice Scalia, U.S. Attorney Sassoon refused to participate in this blatantly corrupt scheme. Her top assistant, Hagan Scotton, an Iraqi war vet and 2-time Bronze Star recipient who clerked for Chief Justice Roberts, and then Judge Kavanaugh, promptly resigned too, writing to your office, quote, "I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion, but it was never going to be me." You and the president nominated Eric Siebert, a 15-year career prosecutor, to be your U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. But after 5 months of investigating Letitia James and James Comey, he found no evidence to justify criminal charges. So you forced him out. You replaced him with Lindsay Halligan, Trump's personal lawyer from the Mar-a-Lago documents case, who had 0 prosecutorial experience and no qualifications. And then you were humiliated when a federal judge found that this corrupt appointment was blatantly unlawful and threw out Halligan's indictments entirely. And grand juries of American citizens have repeatedly rejected your vendettas and baseless indictments brought by the hacks left at DOJ now, with 2 different grand juries in Virginia voting down indictments against Letitia James in a single week. And just yesterday, another grand jury shut down your vendetta factory by rejecting indictments against the 6 members of Congress who had spoken out to remind all service members that they have a duty to refuse illegal orders.
Then he dropped this. Grand juries have reportedly rejected multiple attempts to indict certain figures and even members of Congress. He framed it as proof that ordinary citizens aren't buying what the DOJ is trying to sell. At one point, he referenced a previous Senate hearing where Bondi brought what critics called a burn book, a binder used to attack members personally rather than answer questions. This time, he told her bluntly, "Leave the smears at home. Just answer the questions."
You tried to get a grand jury to indict 6 members of Congress who are veterans of our armed forces on charges of seditious conspiracy simply for exercising their First Amendment rights. I hope you will heed the wisdom and the constitutional patriotism of those grand jurors and not try it again by doubling down on that humiliation. As ranking member, I asked the chairman to add a few extra rounds of questions today because we each have 5 hours of questions, not 5 minutes, but we're stuck with 5 minutes. That's clearly insufficient to give voice to America's victims and survivors and to demand answers about all the corruption and cover-ups that we see at DOJ right now. We've got just 1 round, so we ask you politely but firmly, Madam Attorney General, please do not waste 1 second of our precious time by evading questions, by changing the subject, or engaging in personal attacks against members of Congress. We saw your performance in the Senate, and we're not going to accept that. This isn't a game. In the Senate, you brought something with you called a burn book, a binder of smears to attack members personally for doing the people's work of oversight. Please set the burn book aside and answer our questions. And when you hear us reclaim our time, that means it's time for you to stop speaking. We only have 5 minutes, so when we reclaim our time, that means you stop. And if you don't, we will ask the chair to stop the clock and let you go on his time. The quality of justice in America depends on the character of our government. Please do your job and bring the Department of Justice back from the brink. The survivors seated behind you and the American people watching everywhere deserve a Department of Justice worthy of its name.
5 minutes per member isn't much time, he said. Don't waste it. One of the most powerful moments came when a congresswoman asked Epstein survivors in the room to stand if they had not been able to meet with the DOJ. Every single one stood.
To the survivors in the room, if you are willing, please stand. And if you are willing, please raise your hands if you have still not been able to meet with this Department of Justice. Please know for the record that every single survivor has raised their hand.
Let that sink in. Bondi, in her opening statement, shifted to criticizing what she described as judicial activism and lawsuits against the administration. She emphasized Supreme Court wins and said she has spent her career fighting for victims. She expressed sympathy for those harmed by Epstein and encouraged anyone with information to contact the FBI.
This administration has been sued 627 times. We've fought through a nonstop flood of bad faith temporary restraining orders from liberal activist judges across this country. America has never seen this level of coordinated judicial opposition towards a presidential administration. It is not only an unlawful attack on the executive branch's authority, but a serious attack on the democratic process. In spite of this unprecedented judicial activism, we've attained 24 favorable rulings at the U.S. Supreme Court, their emergency docket, and even more to come. We've done so while ending the weaponization of the prior administration by dropping FACE Act prosecutions, exposing the Arctic Frost scandal via congressional disclosure, thank you, Chairman, and restoring one tier of justice in this country. All members of Congress, as you know, are invited to visit DOJ to see for yourselves. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the Epstein survivors who are here today. I'm a career prosecutor, and despite what the ranking member said, I have spent my entire career fighting for victims, and I will continue to do so. I am deeply sorry for what any victim has been through, especially as a result of that monster. If you have any information to share with law enforcement about anyone who has hurt you or abused you, the FBI is waiting to hear from you. I want you to know that any accusations of criminal wrongdoing will be taken seriously and investigated. The Department of Justice is committed to holding criminals accountable to the fullest extent of the law.
But survivors in the room weren't applauding. One survivor said they were deeply disappointed in how they've been treated.
To Ms. Bondi, we are deeply disappointed by the way you and your leadership in this department have treated survivors. And today, while you're being questioned, we ask you to look in the eyes of every single one of us and remember Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who paid the ultimate sacrifice for the trauma that she had endured. We ask you to remember the lives that we have lost during this process. Accountability means real answers, not evasion. It means transparency, not more hiding.
Another said the country keeps talking about moving on, but survivors don't get to move on. Trauma doesn't work like that.
We, as a nation, have an opportunity to send a strong message that we will not protect people who victimize children, that we will stand up for what is right, despite what our politics are, that we will cross the aisle, and that we will stand behind survivors for justice. We keep hearing our press secretary and our Department of Justice and other government officials saying they're moving on from this. I wish that we could. I met Epstein and Maxwell when I was 21 years old. I'm nearly 53 now. We cannot move on as survivors of this crime and as citizens of this nation without changing this narrative. So I ask you all to stand behind us and demand accountability for our government, because we certainly are going to.
Another accused the DOJ of botching redactions so badly that victims were exposed while predators were shielded. She said it didn't feel like a clerical error, it felt like betrayal.
Last year, I stood here as a survivor demanding the release of the Epstein files. Today, I stand here again as a citizen demanding accountability now that Congress is questioning Pam Bondi of the Department of Justice about the handling of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Let me be clear. Survivors are furious. We watched the Justice Department botch redactions so badly that victims' images were exposed while predators' identities were kept hidden and protected. That does not feel like an accident or a clerical error. It feels like betrayal.
And that's where things stand. A fiery hearing, accusations of cover-ups, claims of political weaponization, survivors demanding accountability, an attorney general defending her record. This story is far from over. We'll keep following every development.